Hi, my name is Dr. Kelly Tribolet, and thank you for listening to my presentation on the impact of directors' lived experience on promoting physical activity and motor skill development in early childhood education and care settings. This presentation focuses on one aspect of the findings from my PhD study on the provision of movement experiences in Australian early childhood curriculum, examining educators' practices and children's participation in physically active play. Briefly, to provide some background as to why a focus on studying physical activity in early childhood services is important, the wider societal context and previous research in this area are key considerations. According to UNESCO, a key principle of early childhood education is to support the holistic development of children to provide a foundation for lifelong learning and well-being. This is particularly pertinent in light of global health concerns regarding childhood obesity and the trend towards a pattern of increasingly sedentary lifestyles in children. With recognition that the early years are a crucial stage for establishing healthy behaviours, one recommendation from the World Health Organization's Commission on Ending Childhood Obesity was to ensure that physical activity is incorporated into the daily routine and curriculum in formal childcare settings, especially as more children are spending time in these settings prior to starting school. Finally, the Australian government introduced 24-hour movement guidelines for the early years and determined that early childhood services have a responsibility to promote physical activity and support children in meeting these guidelines. However, previous research has shown that, despite the provision of a range of appropriate resources and experiences, preschool-aged children in early childhood services generally show low levels of physical activity. Australian educators provide little specific program time dedicated to teaching motor skills within the early childhood curricula. However, teacher-led experiences are important for developing specific motor skills such as throwing and catching and increasing the physical activity levels of children. Finally, there are significant differences between early childhood services in the provision of and children's participation in physically active experiences. As a whole, the research was conducted in 3 Australian early childhood settings with a view to ascertain 1. The opportunities made available for children to engage in physically active play and develop fundamental movement skills. 2. Children's participation within these experiences. 3. The role of the educator during outdoor play. And 4. The factors influencing the planning and provision of such experiences. The data was collected using diverse methods, such as environmental mapping of the outdoor play space, descriptive observations of children's and educators' activity during outdoor play, and guided interviews and small group discussions with directors and educators. Affordance theory, particularly the work of Keiter, enabled analysis of the types of physically active play experiences provided in early childhood settings and the children's participation in these experiences, while Bourdieu's theory of practice was applied to understand and clarify the relationship between educators' practices and the contexts in which these practices occur. The use of Bourdieu's constructs of field, capital, and habitus to analyse interview data and direct observations provided new insights into the influencing factors on the curriculum for physically active play. The findings suggested the habitus, or accumulation of life experience, of each centre director had a considerable influence on the planning and provision of experiences to promote physical activity and fundamental movement skills. I will now introduce you to each of these centre directors. First, we have Annie, a teacher director from Waratah Pre-Preparatory School. Annie had a very sporting family background where she and her siblings participated in activities such as swimming training, athletics, netball, softball, and basketball. Annie believed playing sport and leading an active lifestyle was instilled in her from childhood, so she continued being active well into her adult life. From her own childhood experiences, she placed a high philosophical value on physical activity and developing sport-related motor skills within her curriculum. She stated the playground and the equipment were very sporty and did not set up the outdoor environment with many passive options. She also didn't, in her words, do the nature thing. Annie would also often allocate funds to purchasing sport-related resources. For example, the T-ball set seen here, which encourages the fundamental movement skill of striking. The results showed that almost twice as many resources were available to develop fundamental movement skills during outdoor play than at the other two case study sites. Annie revealed she was an avid supporter of participating in active play with the children by declaring she was very hands-on out in the playground, as shown in these photographs. She also expected her staff to be as involved with the children in active play as she was. Looking at the observations taken of Annie during outdoor play, Annie stated that being a participant during outdoor play was a passion of hers and she considered it to be a teacher's job. The observations showed that over 50% of the time, she was either supporting skill development or playing actively with children. At Annie's service, an average of 32.5% of children were engaged in active play per observation cycle. Next, we have Corinne, a teacher director at Tribolet Preschool. Growing up, Corinne was encouraged by her parents to play outdoors, and as the family had little money, stated she learnt to be outdoors with nothing, relying on playing freely as she interacted with the environment around her. Family activities included going on picnics, to run around and to connect with nature, as well as helping her grandfather in his vegetable patch and playing in the backyard with her older brother, falling in the creek, playing on the rocks, catching grasshoppers and chasing lizards. When she was school age, Corinne also started playing organised sports such as netball. She continues to be active in her adult life. Due to her own childhood experiences, Corinne's philosophy for outdoor play was for children to develop a sense of wonder for the environment and to enjoy the outdoors for the movement opportunities it provides, including the development of specific movement skills. In line with this philosophy, Corinne transformed the playground from one of dirt and concrete to a very natural playground, more like a backyard, and utilises nature as a resource for movement opportunities. For example, children are allowed to climb the trees within the playground, and large sticks are used as horses for practicing the fundamental movement skill of galloping, as shown in one of these photos. Corinne allocates some funds to purchasing sport-related resources for developing motor skills, but also encourages children to develop a lifelong love of the natural environment through sustainability tasks such as watering the preschool vegetable patch and looking after the worm farm. Corinne believes that as educators, you need to be involved in children's active play. To be able to encourage the children to be active, Corinne believes she cannot just talk about the activity, but must also be active and involved too, which is evident in the photographs on this slide. Corinne has also incorporated this in a policy regarding the role of the educator during outdoor play and expects her staff to be actively engaged with the children too. Unfortunately, Corinne was absent on the second week of data collection. However, the observations collected of Corinne during outdoor play showed that approximately 75% of the time, she was either supporting skill development or, more often, playing actively with children. At Corinne's service, an average of 29.9% of children were engaged in active play per observation cycle. Finally, we have Wilma, who was a non-teaching director at Apple Tree Children's Centre. Wilma had a childhood of exploring freely in her grandmother's garden and remembers it as an amazing garden that was connected by paths. In Wilma's words, it was an edible garden, and my cousins and I would go and play there endlessly. We would be self-sufficient out there, learning about how the seasons changed, what to expect when winter came, and how to find the shade in the summer, where all the secret hidey holes were, and where we could create and play. Drawing on her memory of her grandmother's garden, Wilma hired a landscape architect to redesign the centre's outdoor space and create a garden-like outdoor area rather than a playground. Wilma wants to maintain a close relationship between the children and the natural world, believing children need to know and understand their responsibility and their place in the world. As a result, Wilma's philosophy for outdoor play was to connect with nature and use the natural environment to promote physical activity, such as building strength by carrying large river rocks, such as those shown in the photo. She believes the use of the natural environment and physical activity go really well together, and that physical activity doesn't have to be just about ball games or individual skill teaching. She mentioned they were not very good at teaching the teeny tiny skills, referring to the components of fundamental movement skills, as philosophically it didn't fit particularly well with what they do. There are no observations of Wilma during outdoor play, as she was a non-teaching director. However, in observations of other staff members, skill development and participating in active play was generally low, and supervising and interacting with children were more common roles observed. At Wilma's service, an average of 16.5% of children were engaged in active play per observation cycle. The findings have shown that the impact of directors' lived experience on promoting physical activity and motor skill development in early childhood education and care settings included the philosophical beliefs about the purpose of outdoor play, the resources and experiences provided to promote physical activity and motor skill development, expectations of the role of educators during outdoor play, and children's engagement in physically active play. In conclusion, the director has a significant influence in establishing the organisational culture, ethos, and environment for promoting physical activity and motor skills. The director's habitus had an impact on service philosophies and curriculum provisions, and therefore influenced practices and curriculum decisions. This finding signifies a need for directors to self-reflect and be aware of personal biases that may unintentionally impact best practice for promoting physical activity and movement skills in early childhood services. Thank you for listening to my presentation.